Any extreme reactions from the leadership teams that you recall?
Yeah, I mean there was this particular management team, that the head of business at that time, arranged for everyone to go to a drinking place, and to drink there. It's like, hey, let's drink tonight because tomorrow we don't know whether we'll all still be together. So yeah.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Rolling Stories. Rolling Stories is a podcast series where we look at HR experiences from senior HR practitioners. And this morning, it is my pleasure to welcome Nian Chee. Nian is about to take a new role. And so I'm very pleased that she's been able to make the time to join us this morning, because I can imagine it's a very busy period. So congratulations, Nian, on the new role.
Thank you, Philip. Yeah.
The Nian has I think, a fairly illustrious career in HR that I think extends more than 20 years and includes resorts and entertainment, consumer products, big conglomerates. And today I thought we would cast our story around the topic of mergers and acquisitions. And so, as Nian will explain in the coming 10 or 15 minutes, she's been through a couple of mergers and acquisitions with the employers that she was with at the time. And we really wanted to explore today what those mergers and acquisitions meant with a HR lens on. So with that said, Nian, welcome again to Rolling Stories. I really appreciate you being here. I don't know if you just want to embroider a little bit on your career. I sort of flew over the top then, but I'm right in saying, that 20 plus years in HR. Give us the quick Nian story.
So I basically came into HR by accident. I first started my career with a statutory board. I worked in a corporate section. And then there was some restructuring. I was asked, which other department would I like to be in? And so, as a young 20-something graduate, so I decided to look at, what are the functions within the organization that can help me move into a commercial world, because I wanted to eventually work in the commercial world. So I look at the administrative department. Basically, I think there are only two functions. One is PR, and one, of course, is HR.
In that employer journey that you've had, you have been through at least a couple of merger and acquisitions, right? Describe to me, before we get into the HR issues, describe to me like the feeling in the company then, from the point of view of the company acquiring. Middle management and employees, were they surprised? Were they excited? Were they scared? How would you categorize the thinking at the time?
I think in all kind of changes, the unknown is always fearful, right? So I think more so, because merger and acquisition, by and large, doesn't really have a very positive image. Usually, if you're being acquired, it means that there'll be some casualties. The fear are more intense at the senior level.
Any extreme reactions from the leadership teams that you recall?
Yeah, I mean there was this particular management team, that the head of business at that time, arranged for everyone to go to a drinking place, and to drink there. It's like, hey, let's drink tonight because tomorrow we don't know whether we'll all still be together. So yeah.
Like a last supper,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Interesting. At any of the points where the mergers or the acquisition has become public, like it's now announced both internally and to the world, what does that mean from a HR point of view? How do the wheels start to sort of crank into action, and what kinds of things happen at that point where the announcement is made?
Well, many aspects actually. I think from making sure that the internal communication with employees, and I mean every level of the employees, being executed. I think in those circumstances, because even we don't know what tomorrow brings, right? So it's always for me personally. I always like to be as transparent as possible, and in my communication with the employees, I will always tell them that this is what the company know at this point in time, and that there isn't anything adverse or negative at this point in time that we can tell. There was no plan yet of any major reduction of headcount at this point in time. And as and when we do know, we will let you know as soon as possible so you can make plans for yourself and for the family.
I've been in and around a few M&A deals myself. At some point, there's usually a comparison. Well, actually, some deals, it's an acquisition of a subsidiary where you can just leave the subsidiary to continue to operate and you integrate some systems and all that good stuff. But having said that, there are other merger and acquisitions where the integration, that's very similar businesses. Have you, in any of the M&A deals that you worked in and around, was there a situation where you had to sort of merge the two organizations, which means two people going for one role? Did that occur in any of your experiences?
Yes. It depends on the leadership, what they want. Some can be more tolerant. So they say, yes, we know that there are duplication of roles, and oftentimes, one is better than the other. So, they can take a view to say that, okay, we don't need to basically go our separate way immediately. We give them time so that they also know that if out of the two, one of them become the head, then the other one, we give them time so that there's some dignity for the person to look for something suitable outside of the organization, and then the person leave in due process.
Right. Or so I don't know. Again, would you say you've seen like it's been a real balance? Like if the guy's genuinely or the person's genuinely good, we'll take them in, or has there been a bit more protection on the company because they are the acquiring company?
I think you have made a very, very valid point. I think I worked in two different situations, and very much depends on what the leadership is like. I have worked in an acquisition where, like you said, because the other party, the acquired, has a stronger leader in this particular function, and eventually the person is made the head of both teams.
Also, right up to the MD, right up to the CEO level.
Yes, but I've also worked where I think it is like familiar is more comfortable, right? Because your team already, what they are capable of, and the trust level, I suppose, is there. So I've also worked with organizations where they preferred the existing team that they have to take over certain key function, probably not all function, certain key function where they feel that they need to have someone that they trust sitting on that function. And that often will come from the acquiring company.
Okay, that's interesting then. So as the deals progressed, in fact, if you could just outline for us for the 3 or 4 deals that you went through, what was the timeline? Was it sort of 0 to 6 months, or did some last a year or more? How would you characterize the general duration and timeline of these M&A experiences that you have?
I think it very much depends on whether you're acquiring to complement your existing business, as in you may not have similar businesses, but you want that kind of businesses. So in those cases, I think the post-acquisition integration is very short, because all you need to do is familiarize the other party with some of your beliefs, your culture, your process, and they can be very much left alone. I think the
Sorry,
more
meaning that the acquisition is the acquisition of a company, but you're just letting it roll forward. You're just letting it continue to operate, but under the umbrella of the acquired entity.
yeah, because it is a complementary business. For example, I used to work for a business that has a car business, and they acquired a car rental company business. So there's no duplication, you know what I mean? It's a complement to the existing business. So of course, for the car rental businesses, you really don't need to do anything other than bring them up to speed to the processes, the structure and the culture.
A little
But
bit of branding maybe, and all that kind of
yes,
stuff.
correct. I think the complication is when you acquire businesses that may have duplication, especially in the back.
I just wanted to circle back because I remember you said you've also been on the acquired side, right? So just quickly, if you thought about the one or two examples where you were in the company that was being acquired, and anything sort of stick out that was different to when you were working for the company that was doing the acquiring.
Well, I think, of course, the anxiety is more. Number one, you worry about yourself. Number two, as my function, I look after the people, right? So I also worry about the people, in general within the organization, what's going to happen to the larger population. So there are two levels of worry. One, you worry about yourself, what's going to happen, and secondly, because of what I do, I worry about the people in the organization in general, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Actually, yeah, through that process, technology, I just wanted to touch on technology. And I mean technology in its broadest sense, and maybe even from the HR systems point of view. But what was your experience in those deals, bringing companies together and the technology, and maybe with specific regard to HR systems?
Um, Well, I think that one of the experience I had was that oftentimes the two organization may be in similar businesses, but may have very different view of investment in the infrastructure, and so there can be a big gap between both organization with regards to technology or systems or infrastructure. One can be very much at the moment, in trend with whatever there is, everything is up to date. Um, Another one may be,
Lagging.
very, very lagging. Yeah. So in the post acquisition, the integration process, this is one of the big headache that a lot of the organization will have.
The good old lessons learned. If you could have your time again, Nyansa, or maybe even Harry Potter time, if you could wave your magic wand, what two or three things would you change? Things that happened if you had your time again? How would you distill all of that down from all the M&A events that you've been through?
So I always find that be transparent if you are being acquired, you know. There's nothing to hide because at the end of the day, whether you try to hide it or whatever, once the acquisition is over, it's the acquiring company's property already, right? So be cooperative, and try to be collaborative during the due diligence process. And you find that the process will be less painless. And I think that post acquisition, whether you are acquiring company or being acquired, I think be very very transparent, and be very focused on your communication with your employees, because that is going to be a critical factor in deciding whether the integration will be successful or fail.
Well, that's great advice. I know you started out our conversation when I said what happened in the immediate period when the acquisition was announced. You talked about communication, and we've gone full circle and we've come back to communication. I think it's a rule for life, not just for business. I've noticed it with my kids. Again, I'm conscious of time, but thank you once again, Nian Sir. It's been a pleasure having you on Rolling Stories.
Thank you, Philip. It's been a pleasure. Yeah, thank you.